Hello, everybody. How are you all? Good. Good work. You're choosing a magnificent way to end your Januaries. And so I want to tell you thank you for doing that and also applaud you for your incredible taste for what to do on a Thursday night in Tucson. Thank you so much for coming to the Poetry Center. It's a thrill to have such a good crowd here. To welcome back a poet from this place who's been here many times, and it's such a thrill to have her back in these spaces and with us, Brenda Hillman. So thank you, Brenda. My name is Tyler Meyer, and I'm the director here at the Poetry Center. I've just had a couple things I'll say very quickly about things that are coming up at the center to keep you in the loop about. One of them is an event that's happening just 2 days from now, and that's our next reading or event that's going to be at 3 o'clock. So this is Saturday back here at the Poetry Center. We don't often do events on Saturdays in this way or at that time, but I want to make sure you know about it. That's an event with the poet Robert Hass, who's also here with us, which we're very excited about. And I want to tell you that that event will be focused on some translations that Bob has done of Czesław Miłosz especially. And so if you're excited about Miłosz, and you should be, and if you're not, you should come to become excited about that work. We'll hear more about that from Bob and some of the things he's been thinking about. We're thrilled about that. That's another free event back here, 3 o'clock at the Poetry Center on Saturday, and I hope you'll come back and join us. Beyond that, the next reading in our series is on February 22nd, and that's a partnership with the group Letras Latinas, which has done work of presenting avant-garde work by Latinx writers and broadening the scope of how we might imagine the continuum of that work from writers as they've presented it from the 20th century and beyond. We're thrilled about that, thrilled to be in partnership with Letras Latinas. We've worked with Letras Latinas many times. It's their 20th anniversary, and the three poets who will be coming to present with us are Gina Franco, Sheila Maldonado, and Edgar Garcia, and then we'll be hosted by Laura Villarreal from Letras Latinas. So come back to that. That's February 22nd. We're very excited about that, too. I also want to keep you in the loop about a new partnership that we're thrilled for between the Poetry Center and the College of Science. So the College of Science each year does a lecture series where they present topics of research from faculty members in the college. That happens this year each Wednesday night at Centennial Hall in the month of February. So the first one's February 7th, and then each Wednesday night after that, and they're each at 7 p.m. And the theme this year is surprising twists that have come from other research. So someone's researching one thing and discovers something else entirely and says, this is actually exciting, and learns more about it. So we're going to hear about that from 4 different researchers on the U of A campus. They've asked the Poetry Center to present a poet as a way to enter into each of those presentations and lectures. And so we're very excited to have a poet introducing those lectures in Centennial Hall. Our first is February 7th, 7 o'clock, and that is with the poet Julie Swarstad Johnson, who's here with us at the Poetry Center, and we're really excited about that. And the topic is about black holes. So, and Julie's written a great poem about this. So we'll have a little broadside to share with you if you come. Those are free each Wednesday night in February. I'm really excited to introduce or welcome up the person who's going to say more about Brenda. And this is the poet Jane Miller, also no stranger to Tucson, a faculty member at the University of Arizona for many, many years, stepped back from that role now, author of 12 books, and most recently, the really terrific new book, Paper Banners. Please help me welcome Jane Miller.
The freedom that a poet experiences is enchanted and radiant. A poem may go anywhere and stop at nothing. I don't know of any poet who enters the majestic and empty space of a poem with more wonder, trust, and urgency than Brenda Hillman. The freedom of the poet can be misunderstood in any culture at any time. A poem is not a license, but rather an escape or a release. But in what direction? Toward you. And from what must a poet be released? From imitation, from conformity. In any age, control over print may be within reach of the state. We need fearless poets, but we have too few of them. In the poetry of Brenda Hillman, nothing's off limits, nothing's preordained. Because of her knowledge of nature, of literary history and theory, because she's idealistic and possessed. Her poems are bounded by forms that arise out of the making itself. And they're deeply moving poems, tender, funny, charming, demanding. They remind us of poetry's origin in the emotions. It may seem that Brenda Hillman is forever changing the subject in her poetry, and you may find yourself changing with her, because that is what we are here for. In a poem that Brenda and her mother Helen translated, Anna Christina Cesa calls herself a recording angel. Please join me in welcoming Brenda Hillman on the night of this beautiful full moon, our recording angel, back home to Tucson.
Can't waste plastic. Is everyone warm enough? Because I brought from my poetry cottage, I brought a couple of extra garments. So is anybody totally freezing? Because really, don't be shy. I'm a mom, and I want you to make sure you're comfortable. And a grandmother, too. Thank you so much, Jane. That was amazingly beautiful. Thank you. That was so, like, every sentence. Wow, my heart is so full. And every time I come here, I think of just the richness and the fantastic thing that has been built here. And my parents, Helen and Jimmy, were really a part of the Poetry Center. But in high school, this was not this place, but the Rustafan Poetry Center was the mecca for us. Mark Doty and I were at Rincon, and some of my Rincon buddies and beloveds are here tonight. So it's so great to see people and friends and loved ones from that time. But the Poetry Center really was the place where we learned what it meant to have literary life. And it was just very cool. Lois and Dick and Steve Orlin, and later John, and then Jane, and now Susan and Fareed and Tyler being the director of this particular part of it. So thanks to everyone. Thanks to Paula and to Aria and to Julie and to Sarah and all the teachers today, to Claire and the students who were reading my work. So my plan, I was told, let's see, get my watch that I can see. So a little background, my mother died 3 weeks ago, so I'm a little fragile for it, but I got strength as soon as I got here. It was hard to be at their house across town, but as soon as I got into the little poetry cottage, I got strength. And so I put together a 39-minute reading. Our friend Seamus Heaney and Mary Heaney used to say there's no such thing as a short poetry reading or a tall whiskey. So I planned I hope I come in a little under time. But I wanted to start by reading the poem on the broadside, which is in the new book, concerning the meaning molecule in poetry. Long ago, a man told me, if you write poetry, keep your subjects small. I was a tiny, skinny girl at that point. Much later, I heard a meaning molecule in the call of a dove pretending to be an owl in the pine, a song speck circling in a thought throughout all time, like the man said, extremely small, traveling from before literature through the blue centuries until quite recently, when a radiant instance of the unknown paused our bafflement but kept that little meaning absolutely elusive and erotic. I think that meaning is sort of sexy, but it's not really available. Sort of like falling in love with a priest or something. And so 30 years ago, I published Death Tractates, and it's just celebrated its 30th year. So I'm going to read the first poem. And I wrote this book because there was very little literature about women mourning for women. First tractate. A tractate is just a little essay. That the soul got to choose. Nothing else got to, but the soul got to choose. That it was very clever, stepping from light world to light world as an egret fishes through its smeared reflections, through its deaths. For it believed in the one life that it would last forever. When she had just started being dead, I called to her. Plum trees were waiting to be entered the swirling way they have, each a shower of what? Each one full of the hope and of the repetitions. When she'd been dead a while, I called again. I thought she was superior somehow because she'd become invisible, because she'd become subtle among the shapes, and at first she didn't answer. Everything answered. Tell now, red-tailed hawk, for we have heard the smallest thing cry out beneath you. Have you seen her, red hawk, thrush walking up the ragged middle? Have you seen her, mockingbird, with your trills and scallops, with your second mouth in your throat of all things? Tell us, where is she whom we love? I closed my eyes and saw the early spring, pretty spring, kind of a reward. I opened them and saw the swirling world, thousands of qualified pinks, deer feeding on the torn changes, and I wanted to go back from whence I came. Up the coast, along sandbanks and spillways, they argued about bays. Spring came forth with its this and that, its I can't decide, as my life had before she died, pre-blossoming, cranesbill, poppy, and I wanted to go back from whence I came. Heart that can still see our heart, heart that will not let us rest. February evening, young mothers in the drugstore with valentines, all of which needed to be used, packages of plain or lace ones stuck together, and the mothers proud of themselves for remembering. The valentines slumped down so the red merely looked promising, but pressing up bravely anyhow, the awkwardness of what's here, ceaselessly trying to arrange itself. I went out in the night, I called out, I felt along the edges of the panel. Without her, everything seemed strange to me in this world, just the taste of oranges, imagine. And all of this compared to her seemed bulky. For weeks this was true, as if only being dead were the right amount. Only being dead were fragile enough for what the earth had to say. Clumsy for a while, it was too much to go on living. Roadside acacias all unzipped like meaning. The ostinatos of the birds, magnolias, dogs' tongues, curved to spoon up rain. Too much shape, even that which was only suspected of having it, the iris that lay in the ground with their eyes of fate. And then the other voice said, you who long for things, who can't understand borders, who like to spread your magic and your blame, forgive yourself. She'd given you an impossible task. She said to follow, and you intended to, but you'd come to a place in the forest where there weren't any tracks. This new book is, so Taylor Swift had the Eras tour, so this is my Eras tour, basically. It's sort of like everything. I love NPR, and it kind of got me through the pandemic, besides Bob getting me through the pandemic. But I love that you discover like jellyfish age and get younger at the same time. How's that? It's true. Micro minutes on your way to work. So this is for someone who is very shy but has to work with people all the time. Days are unusual. The owl sends out 5 zeros from the pines plus 1 small silver nothing. Where do they float? Maybe out to sea where jellyfish are aging left and right. They have some nerve. Today, no new wars probably, no big button. The owl could be your scholar of trapped light or Walter Benjamin who writes, "A storm blows in from paradise." Thinking through these things each week, you cross the bridge, gold coils, fog, feelings. Syllables also can grow younger, like those jellyfish. You bring your quilt of questions in the car, at work. You'll have to be patient in the risky enterprise of talking to other people. So little progress since the Pleistocene. Mostly, though, you're calm when traveling. Silver nothing moving right and left. Day releasing the caged stars. One thought mixed with no thought, packed with light. I wanted to tell you just one thing about form, because my forms are very different in lots of my poems, and this poem has 2 stanzas of 12 lines each. And this, I'm dedicating this to Cynthia Hogue, a brilliant poet and a wonderful person, who I was talking to about this poem, and also dedicating it to the students that are here. It was written for my students. Poem While the Power Was Out. Hot winds settled east of here. The blurred silences began. Stripes of the nuthatch stayed when the nuthatch flew off, and though you felt the sunlight might bring harm, an odd forgiveness entered the suburbs where, like the dog in childhood, you drew comfort from the floor. The adults seemed baffled, wondering what to do next. Shouldn't they know? You sat quite still, and still, all the way up your spine, reason had hung its unreasonable lights. Okay then, you were supposed to remain strong. You knew this. You were supposed not to worry. Once you were strong, the rare historical voices moved aside so you could be different. Now, afternoon was dark, so how to tell which ones were real? They pressed along through massive centuries. What do you need? What shall we do now? They kept asking you, their ideal. During the power outages, I would have my students take out their phones and we would just read poems on the phone, or they would write poems, on the phone, and we would just sit there in the dark and talk about poetry, or just, interview each other, and because California had, a couple of rough years. So the book is divided into 6 sections. And the second section is called, in a sort of bold move, Activism and Poetry, Some Brief Reports. And this is a prose poem. So a prose poem is just a poem in prose, which means that the lines go to the edge of the right margin. And but it still matters that you count every word, that every word matters, that you still use metaphor and rhythm and all the things that poetry uses. And every word counts, and the line order counts, and the measures count, but it's just you can write all the way to the right margin. That's what a prose poem but it's really an essay. And the Jane in this is Jane Miller, who is part of this action. And I'll say more in a second. Activism and Poetry, a brief report. Sometimes I'm called an activist poet. maybe to make my aesthetically odd poetry seem more relevant or marketable to audiences other than poets. I've gotten to dislike the term activist poet, especially the hyphen. Mostly I'm not active and feel passive dread, bringing pagan practices outside, talking to insects and plants during the minutes, etc. My practicism occurs too rarely, but basically I can't stand 95% of what is going on about anything. On Friday of National Pollinators Week, it is suggested that we take letters to our local Kroger market for a campaign against pesticides. Kroger uses deadly pesticides in their brand. Had signed up to drop off a letter to the manager of Kroger. I've never heard of Kroger before this. I'm from Berkeley. I drive to the nearest Kroger. My friend Jane comes along for support. She is a great, calm, beautiful woman. The area around the store is being gentrified and is getting whiter. We're supposed to hand letters to the managers directly. A large percent of insect species will go extinct by the end of the century. I'd like to become a bee when I'm non-human. Bee will be a bee. My letter says Kroger's brand contains glyphosates, organophosphates, and neonicotinoids. I go into the market. The security guard looks bored, but the energy over her is silver. She has long brush-like lashes, maybe even an inch long. She points to the cashier. Endangered things in Kroger on the shelves include apples, sardines, plastic purple beach balls. The humans are in danger. There is Roundup. It is National Pollinator Week. The cashier calls the manager for me. He comes out. I'm the only white person in Kroger. I feel shame for having come here. White person from Berkeley telling in, a worker of color not in my neighborhood, that he shouldn't have what he shouldn't have on his shelves because the bees are dying. Profit systems are full of violence is my usual line. In, the manager is friendly and not tired. I experience the energy over him as vital golden flecks of winged things that could enter his circle without danger. I am a teacher, I explain. I want humans to go on living. Can't Kroger do something, I say, and hand him a letter. He looks at me with mild pity. Energy wings while we are talking. They never listen to us, he says. He says, call National Kroger and tell them what you told me. I start to say, Kroger is committing economic terror on the people of your city. The cereal and even the beans have been horribly sprayed. Buzzing of moral confusion. I'm a white person coming into a store not in my town to hand the letter. The young cashier waits while this is happening, all this. She is as patient as Mary in a painting. I say to N, can't you just take my letter? He takes it. Both of us know they never listen to us. To learn more about this, visit beaction.org is what my letter says. Capitalism will last longer than the bees. I saw a dead bee near our hive. Sometimes I feel terrible after activism, but sometimes not. Depends on what gets folded in. Whether or not I feel terrible is irrelevant, but folding in the why feeling even a tiny bit less terrible seems to be part of it. The American burying beetle. The American burying beetle lives under only 6 states. With its faceted black and orange head, it resembles those outfits in the 1920s when the tombs at Karnak were explored. The bug belongs to the family Sylphidae and the genus Necrophorus. And during this awful year when humans are upset, the American burying beetle goes on at the brink of extinction, costing the oil and gas industry millions of dollars while it carries the bodies of dead creatures underground to lay its eggs on the corpses, lurching and arching its femurs and its tarsi and its geometrical bright parts to farm the rotting flesh for its larvae to feast on, and when they are ready to fly off from. What a wonder that so much exists with no guile, that existence itself has no rival, and goes on as the thing most steadily hoped for. When I feel desperate about humans, I think of this worker under the 6 states remaking the dead. So my mother, who was born in Brazil and always felt like an immigrant, she came to the States in 1943, I guess, to college, and met my dad here. But when my dad had some surgery, she was depressed, and I suggested that we start translating Portuguese poetry, or Brazilian poetry from Portuguese, and it cheered her up, and we talked every week, several times a week. And so I was going to say, if you have family or loved ones who speak other languages and you can participate across languages and help translate poetry, there's still so much poetry that's untranslated. This poet, Ana Cristina Cesar, is like a rock star in Brazil, not known in this country. Anyway, this is the first edition of her book because she was a suicide, and so her family was very protective of her legacy. Here's a very short poem that Mom and I did together. And so we published this when Mom was 92. Her first published thing. It was great. We had a one-person poetry reading with Brian Tier in a hotel room, and so Brian listened to us reading the poems, and that was it. That was her only poetry reading. Noite Carioca. Diálogo de surdos, não amistoso no frio, atravanco na contramão, suspiros no contrafluxo, te apresento a mulher mais discreta do mundo, essa que não tem nenhum segredo. Carioca night. Dialogue of the deaf. No, friendly in the cold. I go against traffic, sighing against the flow. I present to you the most discreet woman in the world, the one who has no secrets. Ana Cristina was a magnificent poet. She was bisexual and wrote across genres. And Mom didn't know what to make of the poetry, especially the pronoun choices. You know, she was writing very often, and so Mom would carefully change the pronouns. And I would change them back. That was fun. Okay, I'm going to read a feminist poem called History of Punctuation on the Face. Most of this poem, there's a couple of sections I'll go over. The punctuation in the poem is all out to the sides, so you'll get why. History of punctuation on the face. We love punctuation. We love it on our faces, between our eyes, the commas on pages, slashes and virgules by the noses, the deeper ones called smile lines, the history of punctuation on our faces, the not smooth, now colonized landforms. Try agelessskinrevolution.com, an internet pop-up says between news. Botox could fix your punctuation, and we don't want service worker bacteria injected in our skin, some of our sisters said, naming wrinkles after the drier years. The history of punctuation in the West, men were reading silently. Women didn't read, of course. They were accompanied by the lyre and the strings. Construction workers do not whistle anymore because of punctuation on my faces. When I think of the invention of signs, when we think of interpunct, the small, plump dot made reading easier, we welcome extra punctuation over time. Women sat up high in the arena, no signs for when the gladiators killed and on the wrinkled earth the animal. The interpunct kept pace, and thus the scribes began their sense of inner pacing. At what level did experience begin? Thus began the sense of interfacing. At what degree do Botox creatures stretch marks designed to make reading easier? Weakness happens when the muscles fall. They invented the dimple and the period. At the Grand Canyon, we saw wrinkles up and down from the Precambrian. What's so bad about granite wrinkles? What's so bad about punctuated women? The parenthesis was added later. Grief Botox may cause side effects. We didn't accept a corporate account of our skin. We do accept the long Precambrian, the feldspar in the west, the punctuation in the texts. Monks placed marks in surviving manuscripts, mostly not coming from the author. Aurelius noted he had inserted marks. Others appeared in the 4th century, not hopeless, only adding pauses, metamorphic commas on the faces. Marks had been inserted to show forces, the dipple with 1 dot of traces, the asterisk appeared medievally, the punctus exclamativus, and by then, human surprise had been invented. Experience on our faces, and once when we were hiking down into the Precambrian granitic structures, huge Vishnu complex, we had extra experience. A reader suddenly allowed to put the marks on. The printer made the right to put emotions in. When he left her, her punctuation deepened. Only some languages develop commas. Some faces, some agreements have, and time makes other lines within the sense of sense. He started leaving her when she grew Precambrian around the eyes. He was very going to leave her, then he did. Another started naming wrinkles after time. She named them Valley of the M, heartbreak, budget, protest, app. When you see an older woman on the street, a reading of her beauty starts. No stretching skin, smile lines built like the Precambrian. Older ground becomes so rich and rare. After Botox, she couldn't whistle well. Zoroaster's granite, igneous extrusions. The corporation needs our shameful self. In her divorce, the wrinkles deepened, individual wrinkles named for lovers. Young and older writing added time to it, the commas of pure pleasure. After great pain, the Precambrian. Some sense in the experiment grew, the pattern of pure pleasure grew, the measure of text is not pre-death. What is your favorite form of punctuation? My favorite form is the almost pause, to have some extra time around the dream, not dream of youth, poor Botox creatures chained into our friend. Oh, semicolon, why hatred of old women, not of earth? Why no hatred of old canyons? Why no hatred of the valley? Why hatred of the women doing nails and women eating, teaching, nursing babies, walking, talking, bent like commas? Why do the aging women apologize till they barely even talk? I asked the semicolon, and it said, don't be ashamed of your skin. I asked the comma, it said, don't be ashamed of your eyes. I asked the virgule, the parenthesis, the dash, the tilde, the umlaut, the macron. They said, don't be ashamed, shame, shame. I asked the ellipsis and the period, the exclamation and the question mark, to read the human woman's face, and the sign said, take your time. The pauses bent and heard, as did the quartzes and the cracked feldspar faces of the canyons. There are marks and runnels and rivulets, scratches of exiles, skins, age, capacities. Oh, quartz, ah, granite, basalt, lava, faces, stay with you. They remember you. They make signs with laughter. Old women, we remember you. Remember the wrinkles under cities, the faces ours, full of pain, dots and lines and whines, faces loved in suffering and gladness over all the earth. Thank you so much. So there's a section for writers. That meaning molecule is in that section, and I'm going to read a poem that was in the New Yorker called Winter Song for One Who Suffers. Bob and I attend an Episcopal church in Inverness sometimes, and I actually wrote this in church. I'm sure that I told our priest that I had done that. And I told him early, I identify as an Episcopagan, so he knows I'm already irreverent. But the good thing about being able to just sort of hear the message and then channeling the other stuff is, I think that's how spirituality works best. Winter Song for One Who Suffers. And the reason I wanted to read this is the place that is referred to in here is Masada. And I've been thinking a lot of, I worked on a kibbutz in Israel, and I spent time in Masada and sort of crouching there. And so it came up. Winter Song for One Who Suffers. The stars stand up behind the day. A known dove balances on its claw at the window. A cosmic incident of darkness has begun, and a mild excess of beauty will be offered to the dead, which they will eat. On a hill, the wise man serves the people. Your thought splits in half when he speaks of the old revolts, the return of apocalypse, motive, and advancement. A soul can crouch a long time while the heart expands to reach its edges. What is missing past the glitter of the harvest? Friend, you chose to live. How? You did. So many choices, not just two, encrypted behind the mystery of the sun. Then the hurt was set aside, indeterminate chaos called in by love. That poem was in the New Yorker, and when the New Yorker publishes things, you know your dentist will read it. And so my dentist commented on that poem, like, I don't understand your poem, but I got that it was about somebody feeling bad. And it was written for a person who survived a suicide encounter. So I'm going to read 2 poems from the section that I wrote during COVID. And I was reading the book of Revelation a lot, thinking about apocalypse. And so this has some references to that. These 2 poems do. And it also, I wanted to do a shout out to my friend David John Robson, who I asked him if I could, he wrote a great little phrase in an email, and I said, well, I thought, well, either I'm going to just steal it and not tell him, or I'm going to tell him and then steal it, or then I'll, so I told him, and he said I could steal it. The phrase is the fabled silicon mind meld. And so if you write poetry, you know that you're always like listening for great phrases that people say by accident, and they don't really need them. You can just usually take them. But I thought, that was in writing, and David was very generous. A ragged white moth passes by. So we all lived through COVID, and I was trying to get at an experience of the moth of history that flies. Had no first line, and the epic was museless except for one elderly moth flying through as the spirit of history. The sickness was also flying, though it was not alive. When would they meet, and when we thought of the world soul, how could distances apply? Past papered windows of locked-up cafes, the quartz in the desert, and the fabled silicon mind meld, past the uninsured. Mosses on buildings looked like themselves, crowded but separate. Social cell walls and stems, each with a certain commitment to survive. I, a poet on the island of a thought, with love nearby, lit a candle through spring. On and on the little beasts visited, no 666 for them, the rat and bacteria and sparrow's gold corona. The ragged white moth of history flew over landfills and anti-sorrow of the flat few. 2 wings, 6 legs, 4 wings, depending. Flew with the M of our minds or the missing ones, its faraway moth babies in the drawers, quietly eating the sweaters of our mothers. The jeweled threads of the protein wove the sickness, looking like life or death, though truly it was neither, and parallel to that, in the green springing hills, the grace-footed, dark-haired spirit of the will not end. I found it sort of staggering that the virus that was controlling, it isn't life. A virus is looking for life. It's a strand in search of its proteins, and it's not even there to have a will, but it had a will, and it was little breath circles across town. I thought I saw a man bent over, but it was a road sign. I thought I heard deploying data management systems, but it was just sounds in the mind. Dr. L woke early, breathed and put on a blue sheath. Dr. M woke on Earth, logged in and counted a fringe flight of numbers. Some woke old and alone, and when they died, they were ours. Unprecedented was our word. C closed the shops and the books read to each other as we have written, the data-driven. The yellow dress left at the laundry recalled its one body, and the single lemon on the branch hung like a Wednesday. Radiance, what is your intention? We lit a single candle, not 12, and the world's soul floated over the bored children with their handhelds and their adults with their own beasts and their own apocalypse, while the sickness passed by, going the other way in a yearning chorus of fragments. Intention? What is your intention? Wasn't there meaning among the jeweled threads? You can buy the RNA sequencing kit online for $4,000 US. We could hear the great dead with fires far off. We could hear the ones we love, the singing flame. So I'm going to read a last poem in this book and then two others. This is to my husband, Bob Hass, who's if you have to spend 3 years in a pandemic with anyone, can't recommend Bob Hass highly enough. Really, really interesting, everything that comes out of his mouth, everything. So do come Saturday and hear him talk about Milosh, because he's a brilliant gift. On hearing the golden-crowned sparrow, half-sweet squeal. And I wanted to say a shout out to Ken Lamberton, who's here, who's an amazing writer, and he's the bird expert of Arizona. So this golden-crowned sparrow is also for Ken. On hearing the golden-crowned sparrow, half-sweet squeal sounds like one hearing aid placed on the table. The song knows more than one way. When hills catch fire, this sparrow stays or returns to the same bush each year. We loved each other when we couldn't love ourselves. Our life a time-shaped miracle. A new ash is covering the plants, planet, plans. The song's enchantment has a grainy hunger, finishingly seep, seep, nightly finishing, unearthbound like a Saturday. Its broad eyebrows crowd the crown. When we are sad about poetry, when the immortals can't be heard because of fire, this staggered sound, split splendor about our height from the ground. So that's how that book ends. And I'll read two other poems. This poem was in poets.org for Poem of the Day. And I asked Jane if she'd read it with me, but there's so many hard words that we decided that it would be a little better if I stumble through it. It's so when Mom had to be moved from our house, I thought about her furniture and all of that, but I also thought about her garden under the ground with the mycorrhizae talking to each other. The mycorrhizal net, and yesterday in our ecopoetics class we were talking about the mycorrhizae. Hyphal tube symbionts, exudates, glomalin proteins pre-soil prevent the leaking out. Fluttered root tips of padded prickly pear, sand under anxious days. Enzymes gill ghosts, patch necromass under her clothesline, keep spirit close. Beneath feldspar, red bold mica, nets of roots, fate kept, not death, fungal sheets, steady there. Abiotic mediators, ones toward all. Crawling now word open cells. Pleistocene enriched molecules where rhizospheres stayed still. Days of salt, stomata, pores and leaves. Dirt with furry prizes turned zero clouds where chores were done. To branch near places she had moods, mendings, sewed buttons on. Ectomycorrhizal fungi mend her there. Her here, mend moods here. Pink and beige, mold moods stay the feet. Forgetters, spun threaders where dots and arcs host sugars. ampersands of storage compounds weaving loves, carbon allocators, micro-essays of endomycorrhizal dappled net of never seen, don't. Light carriers don't forget, fungal tracers hold back below, tubes and branches, microbe, niche of ground, don't forget her, earth that held her up. So I'll close with this poem, and I want to thank you for your attention and for supporting poetry, and please keep poetry in your life always. I am happy to answer questions, but we're not going to have a Q&A, so I can sign a book, or you can just come up and ask your question. And I wanted to say, try to keep your childhood in your life too, because I'm trying to write about my mother's house, and every room in childhood kind of has a particular aura or feel, but some of your rooms are more special. So when I read this poem, I want you to think of what room in your childhood had a very special power for you, and just maybe you can be transported there, because this poem has to do with how a child kind of saves themselves through inventing God or something, or inventing presence, or inventing something that will save them. And I think it exists in rooms and space and also outside those things. So it's called In a Calm Room on Earth, and it's in my new thing that I'm working on. So thanks again for all of you. Very grateful. And by the way, Tyler writes great poetry. I just want to out him, because he's sitting here and he's in the corner of my eye, and I'm thinking, like, they don't know he writes great poetry. So if you email him and he doesn't answer back right away, let him work on his poem. In a Calm Room on Earth. And this takes about 4 minutes to read. I hope I have a little time left. I have 3 minutes left, so I'll go a minute over. In a calm room on Earth, the spirits sleep inside the objects. A note sizes up and divides. A thought precedes the dove's call. Formlessness hovers under roots and webs while a child reads and sleeps. Hauling pelagic clouds, the suburbs push against space. In a long light sliced by the shadow knife, on a couch between patterns and planes, on rough cloth made by hands and machines, she touches the back of a word. Textures of the actual, colder gold than the reed moon. Violet auras on wood, pawns on the chessboard face the toy stove, creation not caught or made. Hauling strategic clouds, the suburbs push against space. In a room shrunk by time, electrons spin after now, ignoring distance and fame. The page shakes soft dust and delay, earth gathers in the talking back. The child reads and sleeps, touching the front of a word, reading from right to left. Nearby, the mother pounds something, meat or something. Stones in the fireplace called flagstone. The father will be home soon now. Will the father be home soon now? Electrons race in the carbon before frail joy creeps in. They jump between shanks of color inside western heat. In the clock, the fours talk back to the threes. Death holds the zeros in place. A feeling, a trouble. The child does not fear death. She hasn't read enough yet. Limitless forms in the fabric, in the frame of the couch, in the kiln-dried bowls on the table, in the wood, in the ash, in poplar or oak, in webbing of cushions, in burlap and muslin, made by unseen hands, springs and textures, plush tufted fabrics of accent chairs, in plastic final on earth, in the brain, in the maybe, in electrons from workers of matter, a presence composed of actuals, in actuals composed of probables, a presence arrives for the child. It will stay with the child when the mother goes. It will stay with the mother when the child goes. The child can't see in the reading the brought to itself by itself. It is felt and it seems friendly, scattered through time from the nothing before the frail joy seeps in. It's 3 p.m. in the family home, hauling historic clouds the suburbs push against space. Where does the presence come from? Not from the Lord. He was angry. History leaks through the nerve net to things made by unknown hands, brought in full company here from the world to the child in the calm, through the strands of paint, clay, straws laid flat, boxes with beads and figures, crisscrossed in dutiful auras from far away. The 3 talks back to the 4 in the back of the eye, a cheering, a feeling, a double. Someday she'll know what this is, but she is a vague, shy child, transfixed by units of time, brought up, brought in like a made thing, almost loved completely. Was she loved completely? Where does the presence come from, entering earth and sky? The undone, done, the redone, set in from far away. The silver straw, the painted spoon, the light, bright bowl, the probables leap between outlines, the row of LPs nearby, slightly slouching against shelves, musicals and showy operas, the books only 2 people read. Someone calls it a metaphor. Someday she'll know what that is. For the unseen, unseeable, the vast unseeable, yes. You try to get at a feeling. You tried to get at the feeling, reading before sleep. The others played nearby. One child played manic sonatas. One child traded cards by himself. Western light climbing the trellis. Xeric plants from iron fixtures. Obscure, obscurely obscure. A world obscurely felt. The auras press into matter, tethered to made and unmade, in emptiness to vault, half in, half out of words, or this is how it seemed. You read it as a child, feeling sleepy. You lay in the arms of a presence. If presence is only a metaphor, you lie in the arms of a metaphor. Thank you.
I have 2 things to say. One is we offer the reading tonight in memory of a great friend of the Poetry Center, Tom Sanders, who was a person who cared deeply about this place, cared deeply about this university, cared deeply about Tucson. And it's a reading that's designed to remember and honor and celebrate writers from this place. And so it's a great gift to have Brenda Hillman here to give that reading. And we're so grateful for it. Amazing. Beautiful. The second thing I want to tell you is there are books for sale, and you should go buy them. And Brenda, I'm sure, would be happy to sign them and talk with you and answer questions and visit a little bit and talk a little bit about Tucson with you. And then I'll just close by saying we really hope to see you back here on Saturday when Bob will be reading and thinking about with us with Czesław Miłosz, the great Nobel Prize-winning poet, the Polish poet. So come back on Saturday, 3 o'clock in this space. We'll see you then. Thanks for coming, everyone. We'll see you.